Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shehakol Nihiyeh B'dvarei. Okay, Chanukah Sameach Afreilich and Lichtig Chanukah to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we jump back into Likutei Moharan B'siyata D'Shmaya. A huge yashar koach to everybody who contributed thus far to the Lecha's ongoing campaign. The second day is always the hardest day, so we need an extra push for those who are joining us in trying to help solicit funds. And Be'ezras Hashem, we will reach our goal. Today's shir is sponsored by Elliot Walbram of BabySakidnach.com, also sponsored by Zev Klein, Li'ilui Nishmas, his parents, Rivka Bryndel, Simcha, and Ya'akov and Yeshעיהו. Also sponsored anonymously with zechus Shidduchim Klal Yisrael singles, also dedicated as a zechus for refuah sheleimah for Chaim Yehoshua ben Chaya Miriam, and all of us in the room are obviously going to be dedicating the learning this morning, Li'ilui Nishmas, those who were tragically murdered yesterday in Australia, as well as zechus refuah sheleimah for all those who need a refuah sheleimah after that horrific attack. We shall only hear Besuras Tevis. Okay, so we jump back into Lamed Dalet, and we've been speaking with Siyata D'Shmaya about three nekudos, 3 points. 3 points that serve as pillars upon which a healthy experience of Yiddishkeit is created. And the 3 points of guidance are the collective connection between the nekudas HaTzadik and all of Klal Yisrael, that there is a point of insight, of wisdom, of clarity, a nekuda hashayach l'liba be'es hazos in a collective sense, from the tzaddik who is the einei ha'eda, the ability to guide each generation in relation to what they need in that particular dar, which is the aspect of b'nei Yisachar yodea bina li'itim. They know what each generation needs and how the Torah ought to be presented so that it's matim to the challenges, struggles, opportunities of each generational era, and that's called nekudas hatzadik. Then there's what's called nekudas hachaver, which means that each member of Klal Yisrael has a point that the other member of Klal Yisrael doesn't have. Rabbi Nachman says there's a davar yakar that every single member of Klal Yisrael needs to receive from everyone else, and they obviously are part of that, right? They need to bring their nekudas yakar into the relationship with others, and that's called nekudas chaver. And then finally we have what's called nekudas atzmai, which means that we have to be willing and able to connect to the point of tzidkus within us, to listen to the nekuda inside that carries itself its own inborn wisdom with regard to what a person needs to be doing at that moment in time, called nekuda hashayach lelibi be'es hazos, for a person to be able to know with the what's called the inner bina, to be able to really listen deeply in his spodedos, which we'll be speaking about today, to see what really do I need to be doing. I know I have the embodied intellect, the embodied wisdom from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to know what I'm supposed to be doing and to be able to listen to that and courageously choose that. And of course that point is going to be guided by virtue of a relationship with friends, right? Good friends who are helping a person along that journey, and ultimately the relationship with the tzaddik, so that a person knows that that point isn't floating around and it's some egoic point of self-serving, gratification, but it's ultimately like the flames that we lit last night, the Hanukkah flames, rising upward, trying to get closer to our Kodesh Baruch Hu, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. And we learned that point of the tzaddik is associated with the nekuda of malafum, because it's malifum, right? It's a mouth that's full of wisdom. It's a mouth that's full of guidance. And malafum is a vav and a nekuda inside of it. And that aspect of the vav and the nekuda inside of it is the aspect of what's called chachma and bina. So that ultimately those dual energies that emerge from Keser Elyon, that then manifest in Chachma to the right and Bina to the left, are ultimately manifest within all of our lives to give us the wisdom to know that I need to have an nekuda that's helping me get closer to Hashem in a bechina of chachma when things are going well and things are clear and things are on that side yamin and I'm having an aliyah and the presence of Hashem is clear to me, and I need to know what I need to do then, which in Torah Vav we learned means baki b'ratzai, to be an expert in knowing how to progress and how to proceed and how not to grow complacent and how not to grow self-satisfied and content, but rather to push ever onward, and to move from my panim to the next makif, and once I integrate that makif, to move to the next panim, and to keep on moving into what's called the nekuda elyoina of the letter aleph, right, and to move ever upward, upward, upward. But at the same time, the aspect of bina, which is the line, that aspect of boundaries, that aspect of obstacles, means I have to know the wisdom of what to do when I'm in a time of yerida, and when I'm slipping, and when my ideals are not strong enough to keep me floating, and when, you know, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we find ourselves back in the mud. And I need to know what's the nekuda shaykh libi be'es hazais, what's called baki b'shayv. I need to give myself the chizik to know that I'm okay. And to know that Ba'atzia Sha'al Hineka, that a Kodesh Baruch Hu is found in this place, and that Yesh Inyan Shakonas Hapech L'Taiva. There's a whole, that there is a possibility of doing Shuva in that place, because nobody's ever too far gone, that will itself flip this Nekuda Tachtoina of the Aleph and reveal that in some deep sense it itself was the Nekuda Aliyana, because you read the L'Tzarech Aliyah, you read the Tachlis Aliyah, and it's part and parcel of the growth journey. It just didn't look that way on the surface. But with the nekuda of the tzaddik, based on everything that we've been learning from Rabbi Nachman zechus Yargon Aleinu, so then a person's able to identify that nekuda hashayach l'libi be'es hazais in its conversation, so to speak, with the nekudas tzaddik. Mamela gives the person the strength via chachma and bina, the line and the point and the line, the melafim, which is the nekuda associated with the shem yudke vavke in yesod, which is the sphere of tzaddik. Once identified the nekuda and the vav, so that's chachma and bina, then a person has the opportunity to identify the nekuda shach l'liba be'es hazais. So turning the page, just a quick review, and then we'll get back into it. What we had learned in Eis Vav was that this line and dot manifests collectively in so many different symbols, so many different ways. We had the aseres hadibros and the luchos. Aseres hadibros is the yud, it's the dot, right? And that's the aspect of the 10, flowing forth wisdom and intellect, pure sichlius. And then we had the luchos, which are archan vav, rachman vav. So that's the vav and the dot. Then we had the Torah, klapi the whole world. Then we had the inyan of the tzaddik, klapi klal Yisrael. And then within each and every one of us, the way that the yud and the vav, the dot and the vav unfold, is the wisdom and intellect that we have inside of our own mouths, which we're going to speak about, that reveals itself in conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's called Pi Yedaber Chachmas. And then the Vav is Kasvi Maluach Libecha, Vahagas Libi Tivunas. That's the Yud and the Vav. To be able to, going back to Torah Lamed Gimel, be Mekasher Daitoi Lelibai. That's the whole goal of what we're trying to do. Our Das knows what to do. It's just we have to draw it down into our lave and bring our lave on board for it to be subordinate, right, to the moyach, right, and that's called bringing together the chachma and the bina, which is the part of us internally that's in the aspect of nekuda alyoina and nekuda tachtoina. Going back again to Torah Lamed Gimel, ava shevadas and ava shebiyamim, and then we bring it together. Pi yedaber chachmas, that's the aspect of the mouth that's revealing wisdom. Vahagas libi tfunas. However, we learned that when the lave is broken, and when the lave, which is the bechina of ruach, which is in the lave, is not drawn up toward the neshama, but instead it's drawn downward into nefesh, and there it shatters. So that's the aspect of shivri luchas, because kasri maluach libecha, the heart is associated with the luchas. What happens when we sin? Shivri luchas, the heart is broken, but again, not broken in a good way. broken in a nefila way, in a yerida way. It falls and it shatters. And that's, of course, the aspect, and that was the last thing that we learned on Friday, of shvir sakelim, of the shattering of the vessels. And that primordial drama, that catastrophe that happens in the metaphysical realm, self-replicates within each and every one of our own inner worlds, because each person is an Olam Katan, and each person is a Tzelem Elokim. And so all of the different stages of the actual and absolute unfolding of Elokus as it relates to the creation of the world is going to be embedded within our own psyche, within our own emotions. And so we learned that the Shviras Klei HaChesed, as the R came down into the sphere of Chesed, and it was too much for it to handle, because Chesed said Ana Emlech, it didn't want to work in tandem, in partnership, in collaboration with the other spheres. And so then what happens is the Klei HaChesed, which is the Bechina of Ava, right? That's Avas Nefulas. And that's what we're speaking about. When that Ava shatters, so then the R falls down to Yesod Da'atzilus, and that's the aspect of the inner tzaddik. And then the Kli falls down to Bina Debriya. And that's the aspect of the Lev. And here you have these 3 points. You have the aspect of the Ava, right, that had fallen and shattered. You have the aspect of the tzaddik, which is where the R is. If you want to bring your shivrei luchos back together, that's where the R is. And ultimately, where's the Kli for that R? So I want to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, right? I want to reconstitute that Kli, but now it all fell apart. So how do I bring it back together? I need to bring together Bina Debriya, which is the aspect of Bina Liba, the Lev, back to the nekudos atzadik, which is the R of that Klei Chesed, which is an Yesod of Atzilus, and that's all these 3 elements together: the brokenness of the Ava, and then the point of the tzaddik in all 3 aspects: the tzaddik klali klapi klal Yisrael, the tzaddik of the chaver klapi me, and then the tzaddik within, right? Those 3 points, and I have to be mekasher that down into the Lev. When I mekasher that down to the Lev, then I reconstitute the Kli of Chesed. I rectify the shivra and luchas, and then, like we learned last time, we get rid of shikha, which came to the world as a result of the shviras haluchas. The light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is shining. The light of Kiloisi Shakach Mipizare is shining. And now there's a realm that's revealed, the Pnimius, where the luchas were never even broken in the first place. Okay, so now let's go back inside. We're up to the words of Izehu at the bottom of page Mem Ches Amud Beis. And the tzaddik says like this: V'zehu. This is what Chazal tell us. Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahaitzi Kuhuna Mishem. Let's just go a little bit further up. I'm not sure exactly where we ended. Yeah, do you have a marker where we were up to? We were there. Okay, let's just go back a few lines. Ukeshal Lev Hu Meshuka B'Cherpa. Right, because we spoke about when does cherpa come into the world, bizayon, when the bris is shattered, right? When there's a covenant that's broken between 2 people, so then you have the Indian of cherpa. Cherpa is shavra libi, that leads to a broken heart. Shvir sakelim. When we bind the lev, which is the aspect of the vav, to the yud, which is the nekuda, shebechinas tzaddik, which is the point of the tzaddik, shesham ha'ar ha'hava kedusha akadosha shayre, where in that place, like we already mentioned, because the kli of chesed fell down into bina debriya, but the ar of chesed fell down into yesod of atzilus. So that's where the ar of ava, of a holy Ava, is hidden. Ki ara chesed nishar b'yesod atzilus, because we said that the light of chesed stayed in the sphere of yesod in the world of atzilus. Azai nizbatel ha'havas rois. So then the avos rois are nizbatel hainu acharafos hainu arlas alev, and that rectifies this inyan of the cherpa, and that brings us back to the bechina of luchos that are whole, that are not shattered, that aren't in the inyan of cherpa shavra libi, but rather are the bechina of kasim aluach libecha. Kat tzaddik shu nekuda shesham shayra hava kadosha ya'ir la'avav. In that place, the tzaddik, again in all 3 bechinas, which is the nekuda is shining down into the Vav. You bring the 2 points together, the point of the nekuda, which is the Yud, and then the Vav, and that together constitutes the Mida of Milafum, Malefum, and then you have the aspect of Tzaddik that's illuminated and that can bring a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shubachinas leiv, when his batala cherpa, I know arlas leiv, and then the cherpa of the arla, of the covering over of the leiv, is taken away. Kal kol pshaim techasa ahava, kisham shayre ahava de kedusha hakadosha. In that place, that's where the ahava is. That's where the ahava is. And then, although there are pshayim, which is the arlas haleiv, once a person's identified the ar, al kol pshayim techasa ahava. The ahava emerges, the possibility of doing tshuva emerges, the nekudas shaykh libi be'es hazais that enables a person to progress in the irida, in the challenge, emerges, and over there everything is rectified. So v'zeu sha'amar chachmin is chana l'vracha. This is what the Gemara in Darm Lamed Beis tells us. Fascinating thing. Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahaitzi kuhuna mishem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that kuhuna should emerge from shame. Right? Shame is Malki Tzedek, Chazal tell us. And the Pasuk tells us he was Kayin Lekel Elyon. Right? Which is always like a strange thing. It's like Avraham Avinu is L'Rosh Ma'aminim. There's this strange person called Malki Tzedek. Like he's not a Jew, but he's serving Kel Elyon. Avraham Avinu gives him Meiser. Like, yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing. And indeed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that Kuhuna should come out of shame. But because of the Psukim, shame blesses Avram Avinu before blessing Hashem, and referencing the way in which all Shefa comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, despite shame being, like we just said, Kayin, the Kel Elyon. You would imagine that the first thing he would do is make reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he does it. He puts Avram Avinu first. Not lami shame, it was taken away from shame and a son ala Avram. And it was given to Avram Shenemar, because it says about Avram in Tehillim, Ata Kohen La'olam. You, Avram, are an eternal Kohen al devrasi Malki Tzedek, as a result of the words of Malki Tzedek, which is a reference to shame. And even though we know Avram Avinu is a descendant of shame, ultimately, right? So in a way, the Kuna does come out from shame, but it's not as direct, right? It isn't, following the children like Mamish. It sort of is Ne'elam, and then the next person that's referred to as a Kohen is Avram Avinu many generations later. So we know that when Pinchas was Kuma Metoicha Eda, we used Pinchas actually earlier on in the series of these SHIURIM on Torah Dalet. Remember when we spoke about that aspect of knowing the Torah within, of the nekudas shaykh l'liv es hazais, that even though ein moirin came and nobody was paskening the halacha for him, Pinchas knew, because Pinchas was tapped into that bechina of utter, and we use this word I think then, utter authenticity and vulnerability, meaning there was no, the halacha is kana'im poigim by, but that word kana'im is not like a reference to a known group, who have this particular ideology. Kana'im means it has to be real. It has to be authentic. Meaning, and Kana'us is a really, really, really dangerous thing. Well, first of all, it's dangerous because woe to those who are bearing the brunt of that Kana'us. Had some kind of dream where some Rosh Hashiva was breaking my guitar and burning me with cigarettes. Actually, just last night. So, just goes to tell you what I have in my head the whole day. So, but yeah, it was quite the dream. My goodness. Edgar, you were there too. Don't worry, you were asking some strong questions. It was like a Q&A, and he got so fed up that he went crazy. So, can't imagine I slept long enough to even have dreams, Anyway, so yeah, right. So a Kana'us could be dangerous, but Kana'us is dangerous on the part of the person who's the Kanai. Why? Because when you deal with a midah like that, you have to really check in with yourself, like 1,000,000,000%. Where is this coming from? Because there's nothing more natural from the standpoint of a human being who naturally is so reactive and naturally is so ego-oriented, wanting to be better than, wanting to push other people down, wanting to criticize, wanting to call out, wanting to, that, like, everybody's already a kanoi, but it's usually coming from a really low place. Everybody's a kanoi. Everybody's judgmental. Everybody wants to push somebody else away, and point out the flaws of everybody. And a person, in order to do that authentically, and that's what the whole concept of like a whole group of people is like, this is what we are, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The Satmar Rebbe was a kanoi because he himself was a tzaddik, and he had been mevarer, and he mamish had true ava for those yidden, even though he disagreed with them, as expressed in many, many different ways. When you have a yachid, that's a different thing, But then to have a whole, this is what we are, this is what we do, it's just not so simple. Really not so simple. It's such an individual thing, So a person has to be a mevarer. Pinchas is kume metoicha eda. Because Pinchas checks in with himself. Pinchas really knows, no, this is mamish ach v'rak l'shem shemayim. I'm in love with every yid. I'm totally humble and totally buttle to the emes, but right now this is the emes. And the emes is screaming out of me that after being devoured 2 billion times, I've come to the conclusion that this is the nekudos shaykh l'libe beis hazayis. But it takes so much, use that word again, birur, so much clarification within a person's self. I'll give you a silly mashal, right? Here, let's say in shul, whether here in shul or in any shul, a person is talking and a person wants to shush somebody. It's a tiny little example, but a person really has to be mevar. Where is this coming from? Is this the right thing to do? What will the repercussions be? Meaning, when it comes to something like that, giving musar, it has to be with a birur. Can't just be a knee-jerk thing. You have to really think it through. Now, again, if a person comes to the conclusion that for the kavod Torah, for the kavod of a beis medrash, this is what he needs to do right now, that's your call. You know what I'm saying? Again, nobody's going to paskin. You're not going to go to the Rav. Can I shush now? Should I shush? Should I? By that time, the guy will stop talking, and it has to be in the moment. So after, but there has to be a process of birur, and that's what Pinchas does. Pinchas is mevarer this nekuda, and he discovers within himself the nekudas hatzadik, and he, like Avraham Avinu, is connecting everything that flows forth within the world at large and within his own self, his different impulses. Like we learned in the Torah, I think it was Chav Gimel, about the Dalet Alfin. He connects everything back up. You remember we learned our 4 Alfin, but those are 4 Alfin to Fulin. It goes from Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. But in order to make sure that all of the 4 Alephs are Alephs, that we find the Echad Yachad Yuchad on every level of existence, that it's not Aleph and then Beis and then Gimel and Dalet, but it's Aleph, 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 Aleph. You need an Avraham Avinu figure who fights against the 4 kings, which is Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, with the 5 kings, which is Mekasher, the first 4 letters, to their primordial source, thereby flipping everything and showing everything, that everything through the energy of, like we learned, emanation, is actually flowing forth from the Echad Yachad Miyuchad, in which case, every layer of existence is saturated with the R Yaakov. That's why Avraham Avinu is in contradistinction to Malki Tzedek. Malki Tzedek is happy to give recognition to this world first. Now Avraham Avinu is bringing everything really to Kodesh Baruch Hu. He's forging that quintessence of reality, that link that binds everything to its makar. That's the energy of Avraham Avinu. And so Pinchas, who's of that same mind, checks in with himself and discovers that nekudas hatzadik that flows forth from this desire to really just bring about kvod shemayim in the world. And therefore, Kisha Kodesh Baruch Hu nasan hakehuna Pinchas Aimer hinini noisin lai as brisi shalom. I am going to give him brisi shalom. Of course, bris is the element of tzaddik, hinting to this that Pinchas had identified his inner tzaddik. Ki hakehuna b'chinas ha'ava. Who Avram shar b'mekayim bris shalom hanu tzaddik yesod olam. To be a kohen is to be a bal chesed, right? Kahuna is associated with chesed, right? Leviim are connected to gevura, and so Pinchas is being given the kahuna, and the reference to kahuna, which is the midah of chesed and the rectification of the lower chesed, right? Which Pinchas was coming to stamp out with his roimach, with his spear. it says, Hineni Nice like Brisi Shalem. Why Brisi Shalem? Because the way to fix up the R of Chesed, which is the R of Kuhuna, which is giving him Kuhuna, is through the inyan of Bris, which is the R of Tzaddik. When a person identifies the nekudas HaTzaddik, that's the rectification for the inyan of Kuhuna, and that is exactly what happened in the context of Pinchas. Says the Heilige Rebbe, let's try to go weiter, we try to finish today. Says the Tzaddik is Ches Nimtza Shetzarech Kol Echad Ledaber Beinu Lebein Kainai. Bottom line is, practically every person needs to go and speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their own words. Kodesh Yair Bechinas Nekuda, because it'll only happen out of the context of speech. It emerges through speech daika, male fum, harchev picha, we learned, va'amalehu. But you have to speak to Hashem directly in our own words. To take 5-10 minutes and just to go out, shut the phone off, no deep mystical intentions. It's just as simple as it is, just to speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. And then Kadesh Yair Bechinas Nekuda. Then that inner tzaddik will emerge, Bechinas Piyadaber Chachmas, and we will be able to connect that inner Nekuda Lahavav into the obstacles of all of our lives, into the Gashmias, into the practical vessels, Shu Bechinas Vahagus Libi Tvunas, which is the aspect of the lave which begins to become illuminated with Tvuna, with wisdom, a Bechina of Bina. Piyadaber Chachmas is Chachma, Vahagus Libi Tvunas. And that's the Chachma Bina, the Yud and the Vav, the Dot and the Vav, the Dot and the line, which is a Bechina of Keser Elyon. Vayidei Zen is Batal Arla Salibai, and then the Arla of our lave will be removed, Haino Charafis, which is living in an aspect of shame, living in an aspect of having broken the covenant, broken the bris with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Haino Avais Rais, to live in a place where our love, instead of being directed toward the source, instead of being directed to self and to other and to the tzaddik, is in a lowly way, is shattered all over the floor. It's the bechina of the shivrei luchos. V'gam tsar kol adam ledaber chaver b'Yerushalayim. There also has to be sichas chaverim, where good friends get together and have real conversations. Doesn't have to be with 1 million people. Just have one good friend who you meet with from time to time, and the conversation isn't silly and stupid and lowly and stam shtiyot. The conversation is real. You take a walk in the park, you're going to talk about where you're holding in Yiddishkeit, what's really going on. Not a therapist, not somebody you pay. Could have a therapist also, I'm not against this. But just a good friend. We've lost that. I think on account of everybody running to therapists, we've lost good friends, because it used to be, therapy is relatively new. You just had a good friend. People knew how to be good friends. Now, today it's Kanei L'Chachaber, right? Because you're paying somebody to be your friend. Right? But back then, it was really good friends. And so it's such a good, I bless all of you. I'm so privileged in my life. I have a few good people I could, it's not everybody, but everybody should be able to have those Yidden, Gesundheit, they can get together with. And again, that the conversation is a real, authentic, vulnerable, no holds barred, just really sharing be'emes. That's called nekudas hachaver. So important. Kedei lekabel hisayrus belibay me'anekuda sheyesh bechaver yosem mimenu. And then out of that conversation, which we call the sort of the podcast idea, right, which is the two nekudas instead of the shava of the word bi, of the letter bi in Bereshis, it's the tsere under the resh. Instead of being hierarchical, they sit side by side, and they're able to be me'ir one to the other. And we're all able to receive from each other. In this nekuda, that their friend is stronger than them, is able to see things from slightly different perspective than they're capable of seeing them. So this element is the element of a dot. And in that place is Ava, Nikris Kayin, which is called Kayin. It's every single one of us is a Kayin. Not simply because Mamlechas Kayan V'Goy Kadosh, which is true, and the Rebbe is going to speak about that. That's the pasuk he's going on. So that klap of the Umas Ha'olam, like that incredibly important Sefarno, there teaches us that all of us are the Kayanim klape the Umas Ha'olam, that even though within Klal Yisrael they're Kayanim Levim Yisraelim, klape everybody else, we're supposed to be a priesthood nation. But more than that, each one of us, klapi the person that we're sitting with, is a kohen. Klapi that person. Meaning in some way I'm supposed to minister to them. In some way I'm supposed to be able to guide them. And they're supposed to be able to guide me in ways that I can't guide myself. That's called kahuna. It's an incredible gilui the Rebbe is revealing again. A person who wants power, a person who wants, like control, would never teach a Torah like this. People say Breslov is a cult. This is the healthiest thing you ever heard in your life. The Rebbe is literally saying you don't need the tzaddik alone. You need each other. Sit with each other, and each one of you will play tzaddik, klape the other. It's incredibly democratic. Everybody will sit together, and everybody's a b'chinas tzaddik. V'nakuda azois meir l'leiv chaveira hanikra vav, and your nekuda will shine into their vav. Their nekuda will shine into your vav. The chachma and bina, and the bina and chachma, like it says in sefer Tzira, haven v'chachma v'chakam b'bina, will be brought together. And therein, it's such a beautiful, beautiful construct. Therein, in the space between two good friends, emerges the light of Keser Elyon. As a result of each one being able to shine into their friend's kli, the light that their friend could never have, and their other friend being able to shine into their own kli, the light that their kli could never find. It's daika between both of them. What's beautiful here is that, again, and unlike in a therapy session, where I imagine that a therapist also gets impacted positively by the sessions, but really both of them walk away equally enriched, right? And that's why it's a beautiful element that I think might be missing in therapy. Where therapy, again, with all of its value and its import and it's incredibly helpful for so many, is still in a sense hierarchical. This is the therapist, this is the client. But over here, where you have total symbiosis, nobody's up, nobody's down. It's just two souls that are trying to help each other. That's why they came to this place, because they want to give, but they also want to take, and both of them are in that inyan. That's a different thing. There's a level of hatama, right? There's a level of what's the word? Alignment, cohesiveness between them. Yeah, and in that space, something very beautiful is able to emerge. So b'chol nekudos halalu, says the Eilig Rebbe, all of the nekudas, nekuda nikras piyadaber chachmos, right, which is the aspect of one's own nekuda, v'gam nekuda sheyesh b'cholecha ma'she'im b'chavera, which is called nekudas chaver, right, the nekuda that each person has their friend doesn't have. Hey manafim lahat tzaddik. They are all anafim, branches off of the tzaddik, shu nekuda klalius shel kol Yisrael, which is the ultimate nekuda klape the whole Jewish nation. Because ultimately, like we said, we want to keep our point, which is our own personal point, and the point of chaver, intention, so to speak, with that ultimate ideal of the veneration of and the aspect of the desire to emulate the tzaddik, which serves as the guiding light, helping all of us in our own little branches, so to speak, find the way. But there's the aura of the tzaddik that's meir within our nekudas chaver and within our nekudas atzmai. You find somebody who's connected to the way of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And then, again, it's not Breslov per se. It's Yiddishkeit. It's Avodas Hashem. It's like ridiculous. It's not a label. Baki Baratze, Baki B'Shev is not a Breslover idea. It's a Jewish idea. Right? It's not for Breslovers. It's anybody who has a heart that sometimes breaks and that's sometimes whole needs to know Baki Baratze, Baki B'Shev. It's life. So it's not about like, oh, you find yourself a Breslover, chassid friend. It's find yourself a Yid who's makusher to the revelation of an R that's going to help them navigate the complexity and the vicissitudes of their life. That's called nekudas hatzadik. They're connected to that worldview. Otherwise, you can't even talk. There's no shared language to discuss avodah. Find yourself a person who's in the realm of avodah. That's called nekudas hatzadik. Then within that, okay, now specify. Where are you holding klape that nekuda? What teaching are you holding on to? What do you need help being mevarer? You're struggling with tefillah. Okay, maybe your friend has some insight. Also from that world of the tzaddik, where they're able, and again, doesn't mean that they're sitting there repeating Torahs out of Likutei Moharan verbatim, but it means because the nekudas hatzadik, like we learned, is going to come down into each person's life in its own unique way. And in that unique way, they are genuinely the tzaddik klape this other person. And they're able to share insight. From First, we need to set the stage. Then they will all receive from each other. And then, ultimately, each person will be able to do this dialogue internally and to give themselves what they need. But again, ultimately, I don't think it's linear. Like first a person, in the beginning you connect to the tzaddik, then you don't need the tzaddik anymore, you connect to a chaver, then you don't need a chaver anymore, you connect to yourself. Obviously that's not the case. All right, you need all of these three concurrently. Person has their connection to nekudos tzaddik, person has their connection to nekudos chaver, and a person, maybe most importantly, has a connection to nekudos atzmai. When you have these three pillars, then you're set. Then you're good to go. When a person has these 3 points, so then the charafos, arlas leiv, ahavos rois, they disappear. Because a person's already identified and lives with the nekudos tzaddik. The nekudos tzaddik is where the R of chesed fell to. That's where the R is. It means that's what really the R was always supposed to be. In other words, to take it one step deeper, that's really what we were only ever looking for. This goes back to Torah Ches, all the way back to Torah Ches, when we spoke, if you remember, about Ruach, and about Ruach Sa'ara, right? And the Bechina of Rav Ve'esav, the Rav de Klipa, which is the nekuda of looking for leadership that's ostensibly going to lead us in the direction that we want because it looks so powerful, and it looks so intense, and it looks so enticing, and it looks so real. And it turns out that it's just takaf lefisha, it's a hurricane, and it blows very mightily for a bit, and then it leaves us absolutely in the dark. Because be'emes, I wasn't looking for that at all. I didn't want that. And the Rebbe told us there that the tzaddik, and even people who are makusher to the tzaddik, are able to look at Rishaim and be mevarer what they really wanted. It wasn't what it looks like on the surface. They want oxygen. They don't want a hurricane. They just want to breathe. But in the desperation to breathe, they look for hurricanes because gewalt. I'm so desperate. And the Rebbe says you don't need a hurricane. You just need a little holy ruach, just a little oxygen. That's all you're looking for. But something that's lasting, something that's emes. Going back to Torah Aleph, the chen ha'amiti, right? Not a chen shel sheker. That's got that the argil lashon sheker. No, svas emes tikan la'ad, truth. Titan emes leYaakov, Yaakov Avinu consciousness. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so part of the journey of a ruach that's caught in between an neshama on the one hand and a nefesh on the other hand is that we live in this tension and we need to remember. Shivra luchas, shikha. We forget what this world is about. Then we get in touch with the tzaddik. Zecher tzaddik livracha. The tzaddik is connected to zikaron. And I remember. And then, so this is the whole journey. But ultimately, when a person is able to find the Ar HaTzadik in the klalius, within friends and within oneself, that is a rectification for the shviras klei HaChesed. Why was the klei HaChesed shavur? Why did they break? What does it mean they broke? Because Chesed is Ava. And I thought that I was looking for all the taivas in the world, which is Avos, right? Which is Orla, which is Bizayan, which is right, Cherpa Hilanu, which is Cherpa Shavra Libi, and that causes my lave to be shavur into millions of pieces. Be'emes, all I was looking for was a little okayness, was contentment, was guidance, was being seen, being heard, being held, being loved, being valued, right? That's really what I was looking for. Right? Instead of doing the work to actually get that in a healthy way, a person runs into the quick fix, right? Where a person feels like in the moment, that, but it's sheker v'chazav, it's not real. It's a hurricane, takif lefisha. That's not where we're going to get what we're looking for. Where am I going to get what I'm looking for? In other words, where is the R of the chesed that's shattered, that all I see now is a bunch of pieces and bina debris, just shattered and scattered all over the floor? Where is the R? And the answer is the R is in Yesod of Atzilas. The R is in the nekudas hatzadik. When a person is holding on, but it has to be these 3 nekudas. Sometimes you have a person starts getting to Breslov and leaves all their friends behind and leaves their own identity behind in the name of Rabbi Nachman. That's totally against Torah Lamed Dalet. Because the journey toward the tzaddik has to be in symbiosis with a person's interpersonal relationships, and a person's individuality. So important. That's why I said, remember, imitation, we said last time, is mamish the hepech, right, of a davar should be kedusha, because it's a mamish a kfira, it's a kfira in Hashem, who doesn't create anything extra to think that I'm supposed to be a carbon copy of somebody else. The Name of the Melech calls this no less than avodah zara. He says avodah zara. What's avodah zara? It's idol worship. Avodah zara means I'm doing an avodah that's zara to me. I'm doing someone else's avodah. That's called avodah zara. It's a strange foreign avodah. It's kfira. Because Hashem created me. He didn't create two, Rabbi Yehuda Grunhans. He didn't create. He needs Yehuda needs Yaakov Shalom Klein. He needs each and every one of us. If I'm trying to be somebody else, then it's a b'china of avodah. I'm trying to do someone else's avodah. So a person has to get into Breslov with their own individuality and their connection not only to the nekudos tzaddik and the b'china of the actual tzaddik, but the nekudos chaver. When a person has these three inyanim, then they have meaning. Then they have a sense of, first of all, self-love, because they see themselves for what they actually are as a tzaddik, and they respect that and value that and appreciate that, and they're able to give themselves what they need, right? Which is what so much of therapy is trying to help us, like, sort of parent ourselves, like give ourselves what so many of us didn't get, right, from our parents, right? To be able to give over to the inner child that sense of ava, that sense of love, that sense of respect, that sense of dignity, and that means finding the inner tzaddik, as well as a healthy social setting, so that a person is part of a chabura, or at least, again, at the very least, having one friend who actually sees them, which is so important for our mental health, right? Is that we should at least be able to be totally vulnerable, authentic, and accepted by another human being, which is the b'china of nekudos hachaver, and then ultimately to be connected to a tzaddik. To be connected to it, to know that I have a place in the world. I have leadership. I'm not just hefker. I have a derech. I have a path. I have teachings. I have wisdom. I have eitzas. This is what a person needs in order to live in a healthy consciousness. That's what the Rebbe writes. Then Nizbata lacharafos hanu orlas levano avos rois v'zeu al kol psham techasa hava kisham shoire ahava hakadosha, because like we said, that's where the ahava hakadosha is. V'zeu, therefore, kishenolad Yosef at Tzaddik, when Yosef at Tzaddik is born, Amra Rachel exclaims, Asaf Elakim es cherpasi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has removed my cherpa. What's Yosef? Yosef is Yosef at Tzaddik, the bechina of Yesod. Memela, when Yosef is born, of course Rachel is going to make a reference to the removal of cherpa, because cherpa shavra libi, but shavra libi is bina debriya. Where's the R that's going to bring the pieces back together? Is in Yesod. Give out. So Yosef, Yesod is born, says Rachel, asav alikim es cherpasi. That takes away the cherpa shavra libi, the arla of cherpi hilanu. Then, when the Ava is revealed, the holy Ava, that's what we're actually looking for. Real holy love, the love of kedusha, love of dignity, the love of tzelem elokim, love of not being an animal, love of mamish, being what HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended when He created us. Then all the cherpa is gone, all the self-doubt and self-loathing and low self-confidence and shame. This sweetens everything. This means you can show up in the world proudly. You know what you are. You're an Oved Hashem. You're connected to a tzaddik. You're connected to other people. You're secure in your identity. So then you're not full of shame all the time. Because what from whom should you be ashamed? You're doing exactly what you were put on this planet to do. You have these three bulwarks, these three pillars, right, that anchor your whole identity. I know our last levan avos rois. Yosef, it says in Parashas Vayigash, when Yosef was meeting the brothers, Kipi amadabra lechem, trying to tell them, I mean what I'm saying. As my mouth is speaking to you, Perish Rashi, Kifi kain libi. As my mouth is, so my heart is. And it says this about Yosef Tzaddik, because you know what the tzaddik is? We said that the tzaddik is the nekuda malafim. What's the malafim? Is the vav and the dot. What's the vav and the dot on the inner level? The dot, which is chachma, is pi yedaber chachmais. And what's the vav? Is vahagas libi tvunas. So Yosef Tzaddik says, kifi kain libi. Because Yosef Tzaddik is the bringing together of the nekuda, which is peh, wisdom, and leiv. Kasvi maluach libacha, archan vav, rachban vav. Hainu sheheir hanakuda shaloi bavav shaloi. That's what Yosef Tzaddik is. The sheheir pi yedaber chachmais be hagas libi tvunais. That's what it means that Yosef Tzaddik is the inyan of kifi hamadaber aleichem. Says Rashi, kifi kain libi. That's the putting together of the vav and the dot. Uksiv by vayedaber al libam. Same thing. Perish Rashi dvarim hamas yashrim al alev. Words that settle down into the heart. Hainu sheheir anakuda klal shalei believe kol Yisrael. That's the job of the tzaddik, is to illuminate all of our hearts with that light of wisdom, of chachma, of nachan, of emakar chachma, so that he can take all of our leva even and turn it into a lev basar. I see his breast live. Nimtzad emerges shal yedei shloish bechinas elu, through these three fundamental aspects. Hainu eskashos at tzadikim vehem ya'iru bai, connection to tzadikim. That's also interesting that he says tzadikim, not just tzadik. All right, a person's connected to all the tzadikim. Right, and there's value to be gained from all of them. Kihem anakuda klalius Yisrael. They are what's called the nekuda klalius. V'ya'ayru es libai, and they are able to awaken his heart. V'gam ha'yidei sheyedaber im chavei. Right, and then nekudas chaver, where he's having deep and meaningful conversations with his friends. Yachol gam kein kol echad v'echad lahar ula'ayr leiv chavei. Right, each person is able to inspire their friend and to gain value from each other. V'gam ha'yidei atzma, and also from himself. When you go out and speak to our Kodesh Baruch Hu in his us, and you can do that minei ubei, as if you were the only person on planet Earth, where you didn't have a nekudas tzaddik, you didn't have nekudas chaver. All you have is your own neshama. And the b'china of what I said we're going to learn in Torah Kuf Nun Vav, Rabbi Nachman says over there, L'cha amar libi b'shlichuscha. Rashi says b'shlichuscha. And the Rebbe says, Kol ha'dvarim shehalev oimrim, halev oimer, all of the words that the heart says, Hem b'chinas, if I'm not mistaken, this is Lashon, Hem b'chinas ruach HaKodesh mamish. Is absolutely ruach HaKodesh. Not coming from you. Being channeled down from a higher place, all the while that it's in a context of authenticity and birur, getting ourselves out of the way and really saying, Hashem, Kol ha'emet, I'm here to really just to tell all. Okay, let's finish it up. V'zeu pirish, and this is the pirish of the pasuk with which we began. Va'atem tihuli mamlechas kohanim. Says the Rebbe, we want to be mamlechas kohanim. We now understand kohanim is hanabachinas ava hakadosha. Kohen is ava. Kohen is chesed. The Goy Kadosh, how are we going to fix up Kohanim? How are we going to fix up that nekuda of Chesed? And the answer is Goy Kadosh. Hainu Kodesh u'bechinas nekuda, which is the aspect of Kodesh. Kodesh is always Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. Shemen, right, which is here we are in Chanukah, is associated with the sphere of Chachma always. Bina is wine, and Chachma is Shemen. Shemen rises to the top. Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. So that's the bechina of Kodesh. So v'atem tihuli mamleches kohanim v'goy Kadosh. So Kodesh without a vav means Chachma. The word Kadosh, which is the letters Kodesh with a vav, is the bechina of Chachma and Bina. That's Kadosh. I don't know what it means to be Kadosh. It's to put Chachma and Bina together. Kodesh is Chachma. The Vav of Kadosh is Bina. Vav hu b'chinas leiv kanal. How is a person going to get to the aspect of Ahava, Mamlechas Kohanim, and Kadosh, which is Chachma and Bina? Al Yedei, and the pasuk continues, Eila hadvarim asher tedaber al bnei Yisrael. Through a conversation that's being had between Moshe and Bnei Yisrael. and this means klalius. Moshe is obviously the tzaddik klapi Klal Yisrael. It means the Moshe within all of us klapi our friends, and it means the Moshe Rabbeinu inside each and every one of us, because all of us have a bechina of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Moharan Amud teaches us in his drushes to Purim that that's why Haman made the terrible mistake of thinking that Moshe Rabbeinu died, right, on the 7th of Adar, and what he didn't know, says the Gemara, is that Moshe Rabbeinu died on the 7th, and he was born on the 7th of Adar. What should the Gemara have said? It's in the wrong direction. It should have said he was born on the 7th of Adar, and he died on the 7th of Adar, because generally speaking, people are born before they die. Says the Moharan no. Moshe Rabbeinu died before he was born, because he was reborn into the heart of each and every member of Klal Yisrael. He says Moshe Rabbeinu died, but what Haman didn't realize is that he was born. I mean, the minute that Moshe Rabbeinu left this world, his energy came down into each and every member of Klal. So we have a Moshe Rabbeinu inside of us. So he says, Eila hadavar masher tedaber el bnei Yisrael. Ki Moshe nekudos klalius nishmas Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was the klalius of all of Klal Yisrael. Shebetchila tzricha makal lekabel minekuda klalius. First and foremost, all of Klal Yisrael need to be connected to the tzaddik emes. V'al kain, v'al kach, v'achar kach rather tzar kol echa v'yachon lahar b'chaver v'nekuda yishish. By then, each person with the nekudas chaver shining into his friend. V'gam yuchal lahar minei ubei me'anekuda shabai. And then each person is getting chizuk from themselves. They know what to do, and they're not constantly running to their local Orthodox rabbi. They know what to do. You know what I'm saying? A person has confidence. You have to ask every 2 seconds. You're a fully grown yid, fully developed yid. And that's called nekudas atzma, which we spend so much time on in one of the shiurim. Lahar mineu bein nekuda shabai. Shu pi yedaber chachmas lahavav. They're able to shine down the pi yedaber chachmas down into the vav. Shu vahagasli between eyes. Va'az nikra gai kadosh. Then we're called a holy people. Hainu kodesh without a vav, which is chachma, and the vav within it, which is bina. Shanakuda meir la'avav, where chachma is shining down into bina. Then Klal Yisrael will be what's called mamlechas kehanim, hainu ahava kedosha, and then our love will be in the right place, and we're not going to be love starved, and looking for love in millions of places where we shouldn't look. We're going to be people who are we're okay. We're people who are already embraced. We're people who are confident and our attachment is healthy. Hanekudas halalu, when a person receives from all of these three, which is hein mineu bei nekudas atzmai, ve'hem nekudas shebachol echam Yisrael nekudas chaber, hein nekudas klalius, right, shesham etzakol nekudas shayra hava kadosha, and a person receives from the nekudas tzaddik that in all of these nekudas is ava kadosha, because the clay hachesed fell into bina debria, which is the lave, but the ar of chesed is in yisod atzilus, which is the template for tzidkus on all levels. Hanekar kayin. There you find Ava Kadosha, Kamaisha Kasav, Hinni Noisin Lai as Brisi Shalom. And then it goes back to Torah Lamed Gimel as Yachal Leoives Atzmai Im Hashem Yisbarach. Right? Then there's love. And a Kadosh Baruch Hu loves himself with us. We love ourselves with Hashem. It's Ava as a result of the tzaddikim. Again, like we said there, who are called Bris Shalom, who are teaching a Torah of Echol Nesiv V'Sah Shalom. These two Torahs are mamish, super duper connected. Lamed Gimel and Lamed Dalet. V'anakuda hu bris shalom k'masher kasav eitz Chaim sha'ar chesed nisha b'yisayda atzilos. That's where the light is, because it's there. It was kept in the Yisayda Atzilos. And we finish up, when a person speaks with a friend, nekudas chaver, mekabel hanekuda shebalev chaver b'li levush. You receive the light of your friend without levush. Sometimes it just comes out through other things. Just a side comment that he makes that you walk away afterwards and you're thinking like, wow, that was really deep. That really held a lot of meaning, even though like much more than he knew. That was really shaykh to me right now. Sometimes it's not about these super intense direct conversations. Sometimes just having a friend, right, and just schmoozing with somebody. Minei ubei, before you know it, if a person's eyes are open to be able to listen to the taita fais, you remember, like we said, where our Kodesh Baruch Hu's insight and wisdom is embedded within all of reality, even in the l'shainas ha'akum, right? Certainly the sichas chulin of a friend. Va'az mekablum ar nakuda al yedei slapshus. So then the ar nakuda is coming at him through his slapshus, through an enclothement and garment. Sometimes he can't receive it directly. Lamed Dalet is super crucial. It's like it's everything relies on this. Hashem should bless us that we should be able to hold on to these three nekudos: the nekudos hatzadik, the nekudas chaver, and the nekudas atzmai. And be'ezras Hashem, in so doing, we should be zechus to bring the R of the R Aganos that we learned about in last week's Torah Lamed Gimel, which is the R of Chanukah, down into our hearts, and we should be people who are satisfied with the R Ahava, the Kedusha, so that we don't have to go running around and looking for Ava in the wrong places. But Ezras Hashem. Yashar Koach again. If everybody can make a real push for the campaign today, we're going to need a lot of help. The second day is always much harder. Deeply, deeply appreciated. And thank you again to everybody who contributed already. And מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שעל